before we get to the beasts, in the early lines up to line 30, about, you have one of the most astounding string of images that represent lowliness, that represent being outside. All the images that are used, for example, in scripture, whether it is the image of the flood and the going underwater, the images of wilderness going out into the desert, but then also the images that we use in fairy tales when we talk about, Little Red Riding Hood going off the path and encountering the wolf in the forest. These are all the images that Dante uses. And so it's worth paying attention to those first 30 lines. I pulled out some of the words that he uses. He starts right away, of course, when he says, midway in our life journey, I went astray from the straight road and woke to find myself alone in a dark wood. And so already he starts with the idea that he's moving away from that which is straight into that which is crooked, that which is not in line, or that not aimed towards the purpose. You can understand that, of course, as the sinfulness, as the desires that are going to wake up in him. But then he strings all these words together. He talks about being lost, of course, of going astray. Then he talks about the idea of wilderness. He talks about darkness, night, fear. He talks about bitterness, death, being drugged, being loose, sleeping, wandering, valley, like the going down into a valley, going into a maze. All of these images, which are worth, like, even seeing, like, knowing what those images are and tracking them in Bible stories, because sometimes, in the Bible, they'll go into one, they'll talk about the wilderness, for example. They won't talk about going underwater while they're talking about the wilderness, but you have to understand that these are all these images of that which is outside, that which is not inside the city, not inside the place. And it's also an image of Dante's exile itself. So Dante is cast out, and then he has all these images of being cast out and of being wandering and in the desert. But morally, that's also the place. If you read St. Gregory of Nyssa's Life of Moses, those are all the images he uses about the soul being falling in sin, taken up by desire, seduced by the wisdom of the world. All of these images, whether it's animality itself and water and all of that, are all the same images. So it's definitely worth paying attention to the very first lines. And, someone asked, what's your favorite canto in the Inferno? And I think for me, it is that one, because of how powerful a map he's able to trace just in these very few lines. So it's definitely worth paying attention to that as we move